Okay, they've had the obligatory 5 minutes. Good day to you all. Thank you so much for coming, and welcome to yet another in our series of Wednesday chats. Today I'm going to ask Stephen if he'd like to introduce himself, tell us what he's going to talk about, and then roar ahead. Please, Stephen, all yours.
Hi, yeah, I'm Stephen Cockett. I'm the General Manager of Wight Community Energy. The clue is in the name. We're a community energy organisation based on the Isle of Wight. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of our projects and then about the future of developing community energy projects, which pertains to solar projects primarily. And yeah, so I'll start sharing my screen in just a second. I have got a little bit of a cough, I'm afraid, and we'll see how that goes. And yesterday, my laptop turned itself off in the middle of a meeting for the first time ever. So if I disappear, maybe that's what it is. But fingers crossed, we'll go smoothly. Okay, so I'm just looking to share now. So the famous words, can you see my screen?
Yep, successful. You're still in sort of regular mode rather. There we go,
Okay.
slideshow mode. You're there.
Okay, so there you are. That's us. Wight Community Energy, easy to find out more about us. You just pop it into Google and you'll get straight to us, wightcommunityenergy.org. So don't worry, there's not lots of text-heavy slides. It's just this one, which I created literally 1 minute ago. I guess I can read it out for those who don't want to read. Community energy, what is it? Refers to the delivery of community-led renewable energy, energy demand reduction, and energy supply projects, whether wholly owned and or controlled by communities or through a partnership with commercial or public sector partners. So where does Wight Community Energy fit into that? Well, we were founded in 2015 and started operations in 2016. What happened in 2015 was the government at the time launched a scheme whereby existing solar farms were going to be sold at their market value to viable community energy groups. So some people on the Isle of Wight got together and they formed a group, and through a long and complicated process that I was not involved with at all, they took a 4 megawatt solar farm into community ownership. At that time, 130 members of the community bought into it, so it's co-owned by them. And at that time, they had 700,000 in the local share raise. The 4 megawatt solar farm itself cost in the region of £4 million. So to start off with, there was in the region of £3.5 million of debt, and the rest was made up by member equity. Around 1 year ago, we had another share raise and we increased our number of members from 130 up to 246. And we now have 1.1 million of member equity. And the objective is that the solar farm is that the surplus revenues from the solar farm are diverted into community projects. As of this time, for long and complicated reasons, the solar farm has not been as successful as we had hoped for, and I could go into them off this call if anybody has a particular interest in that. So we have not derived the community benefit that we were hoping for, but in around about 2 years' time, we should have in the region of £150,000 per year in surplus revenues coming from the solar farm that we're going to be able to use for all manner of community projects. The organisation itself, in common with a lot of other community energy organisations, is a community benefit society, which is a type of co-op. We're registered and controlled by the FSA. Okay. That's a picture of the solar farm itself. At least that's half of it. We have that part in one field, and we have another field adjacent to it. It looks rather different today. I think that photo was taken in 2016. This area here, can you see my pointer okay?
Yep.
This area here in the curtilage is now very much wilder than it was at that time. We do have to manage that because it won't take long and the birds will start planting acorns and we have trees shooting up there. So that area is managed. Go on to the next slide. As you can see, this is how it looks in springtime. We don't have a particular wildlife management scheme. for the area inside the fence. However, even in the absence of having a particular wildlife management scheme, you can see just by leaving it to go wild and just cutting the grass inside twice a year, you end up with this sort of a landscape. It's very pleasing to go there in the springtime and the summertime. It is literally buzzing with activity, and that's not just the inverters getting the electricity. That is all of the birds, bees, and the rest of it flying around. So we're very pleased with it in that sense. I can actually do quite a long talk on biodiversity and the perceived conflict between solar farms and food security and so on, but that will be maybe subject for another talk sometime in the future. Okay. So about projects that we do at Wight Community Energy, just going to go through a short list of them now. One of them is lending out thermal cameras, which has been quite successful. We have half a dozen thermal cameras that can attach into people's smartphones, and they can contact us, and we post them out to them, and the people collect the cameras and they go and have a good look around inside their houses to look out for obvious faults. We've also just given half a dozen cameras with some grant money that we needed to reallocate. We've just bought and given half a dozen cameras to the local library service. Having thermal cameras go out of local libraries is quite a common project. It happens all over the place up and down the country, but there was nothing of the sort on the island. So we've done that. Mixed response with the thermal cameras, in all honesty. It does really help to have somebody with some experience behind the camera so that they can interpret a little bit better what they're seeing. So, I mean, it seems to be a bit of a 50-50 feedback. Some people say it's fantastic, I found some things and now I know, where I need to act. And the other 50% of people who borrow the camera seem to be a little bit nonplussed about it. So it's a good project. It's a low-hanging fruit project, you could say. The thermal cameras, they come down in price all the time, but really it would be much, much, much more enhanced to have somebody operating the camera as well. Just very quickly talk about 2 photos there. There's my dog. Always like to squeeze a picture of my dog into any presentation I do. And the more prescient photo on the left-hand side, you can see what the thermal camera does. It highlights the contrast between warm and cold. And as you can see there, the blue very, very, very clearly is the cold part of that room. Okay. There you go, picture of me. That's me posing outside my house, getting a bit of a free stock photography done from my 12-year-old. It's actually disappointing it's so blurred. I've got the original somewhere, which isn't blurred. But also, Wight Community Energy, we do offer retrofit advice to people. I've been out to visit a couple just this morning, actually, on the other side of the island, who have a 1970s bungalow, very similar to mine. And they were looking to have some advice. It's actually quite a good property they have, and they're quite nice and warm and snug inside. But they do have money. They are environmentally minded. They do want to do new things with their property, and it's very good to get somebody in like myself who can steer them at an early stage. Quite typically, people, don't want to sound disrespectful, but quite typically people can have the wrong ideas about what they should be doing on their houses. The best example of that is that people very, very immediately assume that they should put solar panels on their houses, and solar is a great thing. I would always advocate for that, but it doesn't keep you warm. And it doesn't do anything for your bills in the winter. So, and in terms of carbon reduction, it's not particularly, it's not fantastic in comparison with other measures either. So what I like to do is try to steer people away from that, and typically advise people to sort out the low-hanging fruit, and that's cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, drafts, getting some good extractors in place, and then try and steer people towards heat pumps, which are unquestionably the heating of the future. So, and so at our service, Wight Community Energy, I mean, we charge a very modest amount for our retrofit assessments. There's a lot of much more professional companies around these days, and they are charging a great deal of money for their retrofit assessments. I can tell you that typically you can walk into a house and very often within 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you have a pretty good size and shape of the property. And to be able to point people in a sensible direction, you do not need a £500 report made up of 20 pages full of charts and graphs, which are basically cut and paste from other products. So retrofit advice. A scheme which we've got going on at the moment is Green Open Homes, and that is where people who have made a number of eco improvements to their own homes open them up for the general public to come round and have a look. So I advertise within my networks, and I managed to corral 7 people, willing volunteers, and then accumulate them on the Green Open Homes website. There is a website dedicated to Green Open Homes. It's run by the Centre for Sustainable Energy. So I've corralled them onto there, and then press releases and so on. And again, more networking to advertise the show. And people come in. The visits are typically 45 minutes. They come in, they take a look, and we have a passive house. We've got some new builds. We've got retrofitted houses, timber frame, concrete block. There's a whole variety of different homes featuring solar, heat pumps, both air to water and air to air heat pumps, mechanical heat recovery ventilation systems. So really, I mean, if you are at the beginning of your journey yourself, by the time you go around these 7 homes, you'll be in a really good position to advise others on, sorry, in a very good position to understand how you should proceed with your own property. It's an easy project to run, really. You just, you get a couple of press releases, you start a spreadsheet, and inquiries come in, and you match up the people, and then over the course of a couple of weekends, people go around, they make the visits, and that's that. Everybody who took part in the first edition of the show wanted to take part in the second edition of the show. I call it a show of the event, which I think demonstrates that it was really an enjoyable experience for everybody. It's enjoyable for the hosts and enjoyable for the visitors. Though I have to say, when you do 6 visits back to back on a Saturday, at the end of it, you're really, really desperately in need of a good cup of tea and a sit down. There's only so many things you can say which are original about heat pumps, Okay. One of our biggest public-facing event of the year is what we call the Going Electric Show. That's an event, it brings together lots of electric car dealers on the island, electric bike dealers. We even had electric boats along last time as well, solar panel installers, retrofit installers, who else have come along, heat pump installers, and so on, and all the local charities who are working in that space in energy advice and related fuel poverty and related fields. So we've had 3 of these shows now. To each show we've had between 1,200 and 1,500 people come along. The last year, unfortunately, wasn't so busy. I think that's because we just accidentally held it on the hottest day of the year, and people didn't necessarily want to be traipsing around a concrete apron when it was 28, 29 Celsius, and that's about as hot as it ever gets here on the Isle of Wight. But according to all of the exhibitors, and it's the exhibitors who are really the important people, they had a great show anyway. It's not about quantity of people, it's about quality of people. So having the people come along and and converting those fewer people into a few sales is always a good thing. So as well as the show itself, we also run a full day of seminars with 3 topics, 3 headline topics: electric transport, low carbon homes, and a big picture. The big picture enables us to, and into each of those topic headings, we have 3 speakers who stand before the crowd for 15 or 20 minutes. Having the big picture enables us to bring in a much sort of broader miscellaneous environmental subjects into that, and the talks are always very well received. To give you an idea of the scale of the event, I'll just include the picture from the back of the pamphlet we gave out. So the pink sections are the automotives, so that's motorbikes and cars. The greens down here were all different charity stalls, all in some way related to low carbon activity. Solar panels and heat pumps are these chaps here in the yellow, and blue, bit of catering, and purple, miscellaneous. And here was a seminar room down at the bottom. So a really, really, really quite a lot of work to put on. I mean, total cost to put this on was in the region of £12,000. I mean, the things just add up. We found a lot of efficiencies, so hopefully the next event we're going to be able to run it for. I'm pretty confident we'll run it for less than £10,000. But and the combined exhibitor fees were in the region of £7,000. So the difference there has always been made up by sponsorship. We've been very lucky to have our main sponsor, Ridge Clean Energy, who are in the process of building a solar farm on the Isle of Wight, and they have a few renewable energy projects around the country, and another couple of smaller sponsors. But yeah, a great event. It sort of cemented itself into the landscape of events on the island. This next one upcoming, we'll have it again down by the river, and it'll be at the end of August, so hopefully not the hottest day of the year. I mean, actually, for this event, you kind of want a bit of drizzle, so nobody's got anything else to do on a Sunday except, look around cars. Okay. Other projects, yeah, last but not least, we've also been very key funders of an electric cargo bike business that has taken root on the island. When it started off, they had a couple of volunteer riders. Now I think they have 5 or 6 paid staff, with the equivalent of 3 full-time staff. So they're zipping around all over the place. They've just done their annual report. I can't, sorry, I have to apologise. I can't remember the exact details inside there, but they're saving many, many, many tons of emissions per year. And they offer a really fantastic bespoke customer service as well. They've actually just added a second-hand electric van to their operation, which is hopefully going to really sort of like turn up the dial on the level of activity. The picture you can see there on the right-hand side, that looks like a lot of electrical gear, doesn't it? Because one of the other things that Wight Community Energy does is commission studies. We've commissioned 2 studies into the network capacity constraints that we've had on the Isle of Wight. And the net effect of those have been some quite significant policy changes, which have come down from SSEN, who are our local DNO, our local provider. So it's quite sort of obscure work, and it's well above my pay grade. It's very, very, very technical work, but it's taken care of by professionals and by some of the directors who have a great deal of experience in networks. But yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, the electricity companies themselves aren't willing to pay for it. The council's unable to pay for it. So it requires somebody in the third sector to do some of this work, to discover where the constraints are in the system and how they can be overcome. And yeah, and actually, I say about the net effect of it, the net effect of it is that we are now able to have medium-sized solar installations on the island, which were previously blocked for a long time. So as I mentioned before, we have a 4 megawatt ground mount solar system that's been in place since 2015 and community ownership since 2016. And as I also mentioned, just on that last slide, I mean, up until very recently, we were unable to do any medium-sized solar installations on the island. So what that means is that if you had a domestic size, something just up on the top of your roof, the local operator was obliged to connect you. And if you were doing a megawatt scale installation, thousands of panels out in a field, then those developers were in a position to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds for the network reinforcement. Now, and the problem was that everything in the middle of that, the smaller stuff, 50 kilowatt or 200 kilowatt, the kind of thing you'd see on a school, we weren't able to do any of those projects. But thanks to the work that we've done with our capacity studies, and partly I think with some pressure which actually helpfully came from government, those restrictions have now been softened. So we at Wight Community Energy are now on the lookout for new solar projects. So what are the useful ingredients for a new solar project? Something to go on to your school or so on. Well, you definitely want a solid roof with at least 25 years left in it. And there's no use putting a solar array up on a roof and then 10 years later realizing it all has to come down because you've developed some leaks and there's some issues with it. Good orientation to south is very useful. However, having said that, if you have a pitched roof and it faces perfectly, one side east, one side west, then actually your capacity, your overall generation could still be as much as 90% of the theoretical ideal south generation. So good orientation to south is not actually vital, but very useful. The next one is kind of tricky, high on-site consumption. Now, the reason that high on-site consumption is important is that using electricity on site means that the host site can avoid buying electricity. And when they avoid buying electricity, they're always going to be saving quite a significant amount. However, if they are having to export their electricity, then those units can only be exported at a much lower rate. And of course, that affects the overall revenue that's generated from there. I'll touch a little bit more on that in a minute. Also very useful is to have a good owner occupier. The last thing you want to do, well, not the last thing you want to do, but it gets increasingly difficult if the tenure is complicated and you have issues with landlords and so on. Particularly, I mean, people often look at industrial estates and shopping centres and the like, and they say, well, why didn't we put solar panels over all of those roofs? And then you do a little bit of research and you find out that the industrial estate is mostly owned by a Hong Kong property conglomerate. I mean, who are you going to phone up in Hong Kong to try and get your panels onto their roofs? I mean, just forget it really. So owner occupier, by far and away the best situation is if you have a local business, and then you can talk directly to the people, you can explain the benefits, and yeah, you can do the deal. A long-term arrangement. So to make the finances work here, you're really looking at 20 years plus. And sorry, I mean, I should have included a slide before this, and I'll know for next time. What is the actual deal with a community energy solar project on somebody else's rooftop? I mean, the deal is that our organization would buy a complete array for that host roof. And then that host roof would benefit from cheaper electricity and the green kudos of having that immediate solar. And for us to buy that roof, it involves us going out to our membership or out to the wider public, looking for investors. And those investors, obviously, they want a return, which is correct and fair enough. And typically, the return to investors is in the region of 6%, and then a return of their shares progressively over the years. If you have a look, simply Google ethical investments, you'll very soon get to a website called FX, and they always have different offers which are ongoing around the country. There's some very well established organizations who are doing this, and they can no doubt they would find an extra couple of bullet points to add on to my presentation. There you go. So I only just made this this slide deck sort of in a hurry yesterday. So I did put something in there about, yes, so the investment model, we aim to pay the investors 6% a year and return 5% of their capital per year. And the benefits of the host, they get green energy, they get return to the local investors, assuming that the people in the locality are the people that invest in the project, and they will be the ones that get their 6% per year, which is obviously a good thing. And a significant amount of funds will get returned into a community benefit fund, which I'll return to in a minute. And also for the host roof, they have a hedge against future price shocks. So, for example, if we set up a project and we say we will pay you 20p for the next 20 years for every unit of electricity you buy from our solar panels, then if the general market electricity prices rise to 30, 40, 50p, then they're still paying 20p plus RPI. We do have an inflation increase. They will still be paying 20p for everything that comes off their own roof, which is obviously good for businesses. So how do you work out? I'm just going to go now for another few minutes into the spreadsheet. So how you actually work out if a solar project is viable. Don't worry, this only go through this in a few minutes. I mean, hopefully a few people on the call will find it quite interesting. So the system size here, 50 kilowatts. To give you an idea, that's something around about a tennis court size array that will generate 50,000 units per year. The PPA, that would be the price that we would sell the electricity. Oops, I've gone forward. That would be the price that we sell the electricity to the host for. And that's the assumed annual rise. So every year we have to increase our price. So we assume it's going to be 2.5%, although, as you know, inflation's been a lot rockier than that in recent times. And as you see, there's a huge difference. This is how much we will be able to export the electricity for. We're assuming that we can only get 4p for every unit we export. So as you can see, that's why we really want to sell as many units as possible to the host site itself, and a 90% on-site usage. So the first year, because we've gone in, we've had to build this thing, and the finance hasn't worked out yet. All the investment from the members hasn't come through, and we have to have a bridging loan of 1 year. That factors in. 20 years is the repayment. There's an assumption that it's going to cost in the region of £40,000 to do that tennis court size project. The panels themselves will last on and on and on and on and on and on. We have no sort of concerns about the panels breaking down really, but what will break down is the inverter, which is the big electrical box which goes in the room in the building underneath. We can assume that around about 12 years in that will break down, because sadly these things do. So we have to consider that cost. And yeah. So the end result of all of that is you put all that data into your spreadsheet, and as if by magic, you get these numbers which come out at the end. So we have, as mentioned, £40,000 worth of solar projects. Our costs will be in the region of 10% of that, our development costs. Obviously, it costs us money to do the development. So therefore, we actually need to borrow £44,000. As you can see here, the interest, that's what we're going to pay back to our investors, is £2,200 per year. The repayment of the bonds, because we want to pay them 5% of their original investment back every year, is £2,200. The top line I should have done first is our annual expenses, okay? And, I was definitely missing another line from this one as well. So the overall generation per year from that £40,000 is, we estimate we can make a little over £10,000 per year from that. Okay, so from that £10,000, we have £1,600 in cost. We have here 4,400 in return to investors, leaving us with £4,000 at the end. And that £4,000 will then be divided into our community benefit fund, which we would aim to have 80%. So we're in the region of £3,500 per year of community benefits. And then that would go on to do other solar schemes, to potentially run an enhanced retrofit scheme, to do more of the aforementioned projects. Miscellaneous accountancy fees and taxes, we can guess around about 10% each. So I will know in future I need at least one minimum of one additional slide there to show that it's £10,000 a year, and around about £3,500 that will eventually go directly into the community benefit fund, and everybody's paid off after 20 years. All the investors would have had their money back, but after that 20 years, of course, the solar panels are still functioning perfectly well. I mean, you are available even as a private individual now. You're able to buy solar panels that have a 40-year performance guarantee on them. So once that 20 years has expired, then there's still a tremendous amount of additional value that can still be garnered, generated from the solar project into the community. There's also an asset lock on these projects, which means that we would not be able to sell them for profit. So the investors can be secure in the knowledge of that. But for the host roofs themselves, they will have break clauses, and they will be able to buy their way out if they chose to do so, because we have to make it quite a favourable deal for the host. It can be difficult to persuade them that it's a good thing for them, even in spite of the aforementioned benefits. It still requires quite a bit of arm twisting. Okay, everyone, so that is my presentation. I'll stop the share.
Stephen, that was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Very much appreciated. It's actually rather more than I thought we were going to get, so that's great. For the newcomers coming in and not been to these sessions before, we now run into the Q&A session, whereby we bombard Stephen with all the questions that his presentation has raised. So if you're familiar with using the reaction tools within Zoom, you can raise your hand and say, I would like to be listened to, please. And just so that you are all not worried about priority, the system will place people in the order in which they put their hands up. So those who will be first, and so it goes. I have a couple of questions just to start the ball rolling before we get on to everybody else. So thank you very much, Stephen. One question right at the start, you said something like in a couple of years' time, you expected to have 150K available for community benefit. It's not the number that I see from your spreadsheets. So where did that one come from?
Okay, so the £150,000 is what we would expect as a surplus revenue, which will come from our 4 megawatt system. Sorry, I should have explained.
Yeah,
I
yes,
do
of
apologize.
course. Yes. No, yeah.
The spreadsheet that I ran through at the end was really just a demonstration, just to give an example of the kind of factors which you need to think about, and the data which you need to get to figure out the business case for doing new community solar projects.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Then you did say that you hadn't had the sort of success that you were expecting, but I would have thought that anything that generates £150,000 for the community would be classified as quite a substantial success.
Well, yes, but it should have come on stream a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, for a whole variety of reasons, which are above my pay grade. This is director stuff, which are above my pay grade. Unfortunately, that hasn't worked out. I mean, you mean the benefit of Wight Community Energy and actually several other megawatt scale community energy organizations not having the immediate success that they thought they would have is that it's grown a lot of knowledge within the community energy space. So now, if you go into that space, if you go to Community Energy England, which is a large, vibrant organization, you know, that they have countless amounts of case studies and examples. So, I mean, if you're an early sort of adapter, an early adopter, you know, there's always a possibility that things aren't going to go quite the way that you thought. So I would like to think that, you know, certainly in terms of megawatt scale projects in the future, community owned ones would work out better. The smaller projects I was talking about, you know, schools, small factories, small industrial units owned by the community, that's actually a much simpler proposition. It's when you start getting into megawatt scale. I mean, the main problem has been because we had to take on, you know, £3.5 million worth of debt to buy the original solar farm, and then that was a rocky road, sadly. But we're inching towards that position where we will have that money, and hopefully I'll still be in this post by then, because that'll be an exciting time.
Okay, well, I have a whole bunch more questions, but let's pass on to other people just in case they ask them first. So, Tristan, would you like to have a go, please?
Yes, Stephen, thank you very much. I noticed you sell your electricity to the grid at 4p. Is there not a way that you can have a local energy trading scheme so that people on the island could buy the electricity from you at maybe 15p, you know, below the standard rate? And if they have batteries, they could top them up and you'd get a bit more trading locally.
So I would have to say possibly would be the answer to that. And I mean, I'm aware that there are local energy trading clubs and so on. But I mean, for us as a small organisation, that would involve an entire new tranche of administration. We do not have any. I mean, talking about our megawatt farm, the 4 megawatt farm, we don't have any way to sell that directly to people. That's all sold at bulk. Actually goes to EDF at the moment. That they buy the whole lot
Okay.
of us straight away.
Okay.
With the smaller installations, this for example 50 kilowatt installation, there's just not enough generation there to justify that level of additional administration. With the megawatt scale, there could be, but it's not something that we currently do. But I am aware that other renewable energy generators do that.
Yeah.
I mean, most notably Ripple. I mean, they're the big one. But obviously, they'll have dozens of full-time staff who are managing these things. But I'm the only staff member, and I only work on a part-time basis. That's the scale of Wight Community Energy. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just to bring your attention, Stephen, there's a couple of questions in the chat that people would like to go offline with you, particularly Jules. So maybe you can set up a conversation with him. He clearly wants to go ahead.
Yeah, and you're obviously very welcome to share my contact details. I'm very happy to discuss any of these topics. So,
but everything we're discussing today goes public on a sort of wiki basis, so it will go. John, over in the Forest of Dean. And you're on mute, John.
Fine. Yep, got it. Couldn't get my menu. I suppose that I'm more apocalyptic about the future, really, particularly with energy. We've had dreadful problems in this area. We've just got our main road now, and Monmouth to Chipstow Road is closed because of the increased rainfall and hillside instability. And we've also got the main A40, which is the main route into Wales from England, really, main economic link. And that's only operating 2 of its 4 carriageways. And it's been almost like that for about a year now. In the light of extreme weather, uncertain political and global politics, how do we move to much more resilient local grids where we start to really plan the energy resources that are in the region we live in to provide power for us, the communities? And do you have any views on that?
I mean, I don't have the expertise to really speak to it in a precise way. I mean, I would always, I mean, the first stop in all of these matters, of course, is energy efficiency, of course, and I mean, getting electrifying our homes and so on is always going to be the first stop, and generally speaking, I mean, resilience is actually found through interconnections, isn't it? So whilst the sun isn't shining here, it might be up the road, and whilst the wind's not blowing there, it might be blowing elsewhere. I mean, something that's very often said to me on the Isle of Wight is, wouldn't it be great if we were energy independent over here? And well, actually, no, it wouldn't be. What would be great is if we have like a really high functioning grid, so that we can share these resources on an ad hoc basis when we need them, when it's windy there and when it's calm there and so on. With regards to the sort of like wider questions about networks and the precise sort of pros and cons of of how granular your local community should be, I'm not really qualified to speak to that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Yeah.
Are you done, John?
Well, I suppose I'd only say that in Wales, I live 20 yards inside Wales. We have the government has funded 40 resilience hubs, which are basically village halls that have batteries and can provide resources for quite isolated communities. And that seems to be a very good idea,
Doesn't that go back to Tristram's suggestion of having lots of battery packs that you can charge when there is electricity and then rely on when there isn't?
Yes.
Yes, but always try and using less is always the first stop. I mean, if you ever do the back of the envelope calculation on the sort of quantity of batteries that you need to get through a long period of a power outage, it becomes very quite eye-watering quite quickly. I mean, I'm speaking from my personal experience. I have a small battery in this house, and and we get through it very quickly, unfortunately. So always go bigger if you're getting a domestic battery.
And then if you can start throwing in your EVs and all the others, there are sort of 50 EVs in a village or something, then there's substantial battery power there for an emergency use.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, even an old banger of an EV like my 2016 Nissan Leaf, which is out there, which is really the equivalent of an old banger. I mean, that has around about 18 kilowatt hours left in the battery pack there, which if only I could take it out and stick it on the wall inside the house, it'd be worth a lot more money than the car is on the driveway. As much as fond of it as I am.
Stephen, do you get the feeling that the infrastructure that we're discussing here, the ability to plug your EV in so that it does provide electricity store to your own house, for instance, is that on its way?
Yeah, I mean, frustratingly, yes, it's on its way, but boy, it's been on its way for a long time. It seemed to be stuck in a cycle of studies and tests, and modeling. I mean, I know going back, this has always been talked about, and going back a number of years, there was a couple of organisations who were installing bi-directional chargers into people's homes to test the theory, and it just seems like such an obvious, it really seems like the low-hanging fruit of this entire realm. But it's proving a lot more difficult than people anticipated. I mean, you can go out and buy yourself a bi-directional charger now, and I think they're in the region of £3,000 or £4,000, which are fantastic. I mean, some people, if they have the money, I know people really enjoy being early innovators, and that's great. But there's no mass market appeal there because it's incredibly difficult to make that money back. I mean, the way you would make that money back, of course, is by charging cheap at night and then running your house through the daytime. But if you've had to expend £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 for this box next to your car, it's going to take a while to do that. And also, of course, there's a nervousness about using your car battery in that fashion, up, down, up, down, up, down. There is nervousness about how many times you can cycle the car battery. But as time goes on, it becomes increasingly evident that car batteries are remarkably robust. But we still, all of us, myself included, even though I'm a little bit of a mini expert in this stuff, you still can't help but have a bit of nervousness about batteries. That's how we've been conditioned, isn't it? Because we all grew up throwing batteries away after 2 weeks in the torch.
Yeah. Let me just check if anyone else has questions, because I have a bunch, but I don't want to tread on other people's toes. No one's showing signs of frantic hand waving or anything, so let me press on. One of your statements, Stephen, was that you wanted the local electricity that you're generating to be used by the host. In other words, exporting it was a bad idea. But my question would be, how far around the solar farm counts as local host? I mean, can you bring in a local village and supply them?
Okay, so what I was referring to specifically then was with the host. It's where that meter is. So where is it? You have to put it into that specific electricity meter. Okay, is that clear?
No, assume totally on my part.
No, okay. So yeah, so the host site is the site that has the electricity meter where you are feeding in the imports and the exports, and where that host sites, are taking their energy from the grid. Okay, so as soon as you export off of that site, it goes into the national grid, and that's that. Having said that, there are some new innovative schemes around some local energy groups that have found a way to use the local substation as for want of a better word, an additional substation, an additional hub for renewable energy that are directly connected to that. I mean, that's a new innovative thing that's coming along, and it's something that I can, that's worth looking more into. So there are increasing innovations in this.
Yeah, because I could see sort of building on Tristram's thoughts that the more that your generated electricity is being used locally as an income source and as a reduction in costs to the local community, then that's obviously advantageous. And I know that the links to the grid are the major holdup. So if you hear of people building their farms, then they can't get connected for 10 or 15 years. To the grid, and therefore if there's a way around that by routing your electricity to your local consumers without interfering with the grid, I mean, you don't start building more power lines, but I would have thought there was a clever way of sharing the same distribution lines.
I'm sure there is, and as mentioned, I mean, it's only within the last week or so I've sort of stumbled across this idea of using a local substation. But of course, you know, you have to remember that every additional layer of complexity that you add on to this reduces from the revenue which you have available. I mean, the typical objective of a community, and not by no means exclusive, but the typical objective of a community energy organisation is to create revenue that it can put into its community benefit fund to then go on to, you know, to deliver other projects or to give to a local fuel. I mean, in the case of Wight Community Energy, we're hoping to give quite a lot of money to a local fuel poverty charity, you know, the Footprint Trust, I'm sure you're aware of, Graham. And then, but so another objective, an alternative objective, could be to provide into your local community in that other sense.
And one more question before I pass on to Dave. Do you know what it costs the big suppliers to generate a kilowatt hour of electricity? And you're saying you can get 4p, but surely their cost of generation is higher than that. So why aren't they paying you more than that?
Why aren't they paying? Well, so just for your information, so I mean, currently there are PPAs, you know, there are power purchase agreements available for the likes of us that would give around about 8p. But the decision is made that when you do the long-term modelling, you go in significantly lower than that, because the last thing you want to do is set up a model for 20 years, and then 3-4 years into it, you suddenly discover you can only sell your electricity for half the amount. So that's why we tend to put, you know, much lower on the spreadsheet. I mean, in actual fact, we are getting 8p at the moment, and it's about 9p I think we're getting from the solar farm, from the megawatt scale. And from that solar farm as well, I mean, lucky us, that was built at the time of when FIT payments existed, the feed-in tariffs.
Yep.
So we have a significant income from the feed-in tariff. So even if our PPA went to zero, we would still, you know, that would end all the fun stuff. But, you know, we would still have an income from FIT, but FIT is long gone, sadly.
Okay, thank you. And out of interest, do you happen to know what the rough cost is of producing electricity by the main providers? I mean, forget Hinkley Point, but how about some big wind farm somewhere?
Yeah, well, they generally price themselves in megawatts, don't they, rather than kilowatts. But I think it's around about 80 pounds. I mean, if you look at the recent auctions, maybe someone else on the call knows better than me. If you look at the recent auctions for wind power, I think they were coming in around about 80 pounds a megawatt, so which translates to 8p a unit.
Yeah.
And then everything upwards from that is transmission costs and distribution costs and profits.
Yeah. And they need to invest for the future. Thank you very much. Dave, over to you, please. Dave Faulkner.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Couple of questions on the sort of model of putting rooftop solar in or something. Is how do you fund the development cost? And do you make a provision for replacing the inverter? Didn't see any of that in your spreadsheet. So you're suddenly going to get hit with a £12,000 or whatever it is cost for an inverter. Not 12,000, whatever it was, a few £1,000s.
Yeah, no, there was an inverter on there. We do depreciate the inverter over 12 years. So we put away, I mean, in that model I had up there, there was, I think £187 a year is put into the cost for an inverter.
Yeah.
Okay. And sorry, the first question was?
How did you fund the development costs?
So the development costs would be assumed to be principally it's my time. Well, no, it's not actually principally my time. I mean, the biggest development cost is getting a structural survey done, to get the structural engineer in to check the roof. I mean, that can be, between £1,500 and £2,500. And that is, it comes out of our existing funds, and then we have to add that onto the cost. So in that example I gave, we think we can put that solar array up for around about £40,000, but the share raise would be for £44,000, and then that would cover that cost. In addition to that, our ongoing costs, we putting in £500 a year for our time, and another £500 a year for monitoring and metering and accountancy.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Okay,
in total, with the inverter and our time and so on, for that example, which is making £10,000 a year, there was £1,600 a year just in costs, which is low. I mean, other organisations run it higher than that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Well, it looks like we've run out of questions, Stephen. So let me just say thank you very much again for what I actually found fascinating. So thank you very much. For those of you who are looking to next week, we've got rather a change of pace. David Morgan-Jones from UShot in Hampshire is going to start the first of what I hope will be several workshops on how you build a roadmap towards net zero. And you're doing this at the parish level. So basically, a lot of people are asking us, so where do we go from having declared a climate emergency? Well, we're going to be running a series of workshops on building the roadmap that you then can choose to follow if you can get the volunteers to work with you. So that will be starting next week. And I hope that it's going to be fascinating, and look forward to seeing as many of you as possible. Henry has raised his hand.
Yeah, sorry, there's a question which Stephen hasn't answered. Where do you get your PPA price from? Which firm do you get it from, please?
The PPA price for our export, most likely from Unity, who are a branch of Octopus, that very successful, vibrant, interesting company. Let's spell it. Unity, yeah. It's spelled how it sounds. Unity.
Okay,
just
really
give it a
helpful.
Google. You'll soon find them. They're another great organisation which are branching out from Octopus.
We have actually had a banter session from them.
Okay.
A few months ago. So
yeah. They're not the only people, but the only ones that spring to mind. There's 3 who operate in that space, I believe. Okay.
But Octopus is such an extraordinary company. Yeah. Anybody else, please? Or shall we all say thank you very much? It's lunchtime. Look forward to you seeing us again. And Stephen, thank you. Take care.
That's okay. Yeah, any queries, be it thermal cameras, how to run an electric car show, how to start a little retrofit advice service, any of those things, very happy to talk it through. Okay.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.